The clock struck 11 p.m. at Atlanta Memorial Hospital as Jasmine Thompson adjusted her nurse's cap in front of the staff room mirror. At 28 years old, she was one of the youngest senior nurses in the rehabilitation ward, known for her gentle touch and caring nature. Her chocolate brown skin glowed under the harsh hospital lights as she prepared for another busy night shift. "Jasmine, we have a new admission in room 405, Sarah, the head nurse, called out while passing by. He's a special case from Boston General. Dr. Richards wants you to handle his care personally." Walking down the quiet corridor, Jasmine reviewed the patient's file. Marcus Stevens, 32, transferred for specialized rehabilitation after a serious car accident 3 months ago. His medical history looked complex, but what caught her attention was his occupation, a biomedical engineer with several patents to his name. As she approached room 405, Jasmine heard warm laughter coming from inside. It was unusual for patients to be so cheerful, especially during the late hours. She knocked gently and entered to find a handsome man in a wheelchair, surrounded by medical textbooks and a laptop. "Good evening, Mr. Stevens. I'm Jasmine Thompson, your assigned nurse for the night shift," she said professionally, though she couldn't help but notice his striking green eyes and friendly smile. "Please call me Marcus," he replied, closing his laptop. "I was just catching up on some research. Old habits die hard, I guess." His voice was warm and confident, despite his condition. As Jasmine checked his vital signs and reviewed his medication schedule, she was impressed by his knowledge of medical terms and procedures. Most patients simply nodded along, but Marcus asked intelligent questions about each medication and its purpose. "You seem to know quite a bit about medical care," Jasmine commented while adjusting his IV drip. Marcus's eyes lit up. "Well, my work involves developing better medical devices for patients with mobility issues. I never thought I'd end up testing them personally, though," he added with a slight chuckle, gesturing to his wheelchair. Over the next few hours, Jasmine found herself returning to room 405 more often than necessary. Marcus was different from other patients. Despite being confined to a wheelchair, his spirit remained unbroken. He shared stories about his work in Boston, his dreams of improving patient care, and his determination to turn his accident into an opportunity to better understand his users' needs. "You know what's funny?" he said during one of their conversations. "I used to think I understood what patients went through. Now I realize I had no idea. This experience, as challenging as it is, will make my work so much more meaningful." Jasmine found herself drawn to his positive outlook and intellectual curiosity. While other patients often complained about their conditions, Marcus spent his time sketching designs for improved wheelchair mechanisms in his notebook. Around 3 a.m. during her final round, Jasmine found Marcus still awake, staring out the window at the Atlanta skyline. "Can't sleep?" she asked, entering the room. "Just thinking," he replied, turning to face her. "Thank you, Jasmine. Most healthcare workers treat me like I'm just another case, but you see me as a person first." Their eyes met for a moment, and Jasmine felt something stir in her heart. In all her years of nursing, she had never connected with a patient like this. Marcus wasn't just another patient. He was someone who saw the world differently, someone who turned adversity into opportunity. As she left his room that night, Jasmine couldn't help but smile. She had no way of knowing that this was just the beginning of an extraordinary journey, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and the power of seeing beyond physical limitations. Little did she know that Marcus Stevens would become more than just another patient in room 405. He would become the man who would change her life forever, starting with this unexpected meeting on a quiet night shift at Atlanta Memorial Hospital. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine found herself looking forward to her night shifts more than ever before. Marcus's room became a bright spot in her routine, always filled with the soft glow of his laptop and the sound of his cheerful voice. One quiet evening, while helping Marcus with his physical therapy exercises, Jasmine noticed a complex diagram on his computer screen. "What's that?" she asked, adjusting his leg position carefully. "It's my latest project," Marcus replied, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "I'm designing a new type of wheelchair that can handle stairs better. Being in one now has shown me all the flaws in current designs." He winced slightly as she helped him stretch, but kept talking about his ideas. Sarah, the head nurse, noticed how Jasmine spent extra time in room 405. Be careful, she warned during their coffee break. Getting too attached to patients isn't professional. But Jasmine saw something in Marcus that others missed, a brilliant mind that refused to be limited by circumstances. During their therapy sessions, Marcus shared stories about his life before the accident. He had graduated top of his class from MIT, started his own medical technology company, and traveled the world presenting his innovations. But you know what's strange? He said one night, as Jasmine helped him practice his arm exercises, I feel like I'm learning more about life now than I ever did when I could walk. Jasmine was touched by his honesty. How so? She asked, carefully supporting his shoulder. When you're able-bodied, you take so much for granted, he explained. Now, every small victory feels amazing. Like yesterday, when I managed to pick up that cup of water without help, it felt better than winning any engineering award. Their conversations weren't always serious. Marcus had a playful side that few people got to see. He would tell jokes during painful therapy sessions and share funny stories about his college days. Sometimes, he would challenge Jasmine to wheelchair races in the empty hallways during quiet nights, making her laugh despite her professional demeanor. One rainy evening, Jasmine found Marcus looking frustrated after a particularly difficult therapy session. I used to run marathons, he said quietly, staring out the window. Now I can barely wheel myself down the hall. Without thinking, Jasmine took his hand. But look how far you've come in just a few weeks, she encouraged. Your determination is inspiring. Marcus squeezed her hand gently, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The simple gesture felt more meaningful than any words could express. As days turned into weeks, other staff members noticed the change in both of them. Jasmine smiled more often, and Marcus worked harder at his rehabilitation than any other patient. During their night talks, they discovered shared dreams of improving healthcare and making a difference in people's lives. You know, Marcus said one night, as Jasmine was checking his vital signs, before my accident, I thought I knew everything about designing medical equipment. Now I realize I knew nothing. Having you as my nurse has taught me that good healthcare isn't just about the technology, it's about the human connection. Jasmine felt her heart skip a beat at his words. She was no longer just seeing Marcus as a patient. His courage, intelligence, and kindness had broken down the professional barriers she had carefully built over years of nursing. What started as a normal nurse-patient relationship was slowly transforming into something deeper, something that both excited and scared Jasmine. She knew getting emotionally involved with a patient was against hospital policy, but there was something special about Marcus Stevens that made all her careful rules start to crumble. Little did she know that Marcus was harboring a secret that would soon change everything between them, a truth hidden behind his genuine smiles and brilliant mind. The day of Marcus's discharge arrived sooner than Jasmine expected. After 6 weeks in the rehabilitation ward, he had made remarkable progress. As she helped him pack his belongings, the room that had been filled with their laughter and late-night conversations felt strangely empty. I guess this is it, Jasmine said, trying to keep her voice professional as she handed him his discharge papers. Her heart felt heavy, knowing their daily interactions would end. Marcus wheeled himself closer to her desk. Actually, he said, his voice slightly nervous, I was wondering if you'd have dinner with me next week. I know this great accessible restaurant downtown. Jasmine froze. As a nurse, she knew dating former patients wasn't strictly against hospital rules, but it was definitely frowned upon. Yet looking at Marcus's hopeful expression, she couldn't deny the connection they'd built over the past weeks. I'd love to, she heard herself say before her professional side could object. Their first date was at a cozy Italian restaurant. Marcus had already made sure everything was wheelchair-friendly, showing his usual thoughtful planning. As they shared stories over pasta, Jasmine saw him in a new light, not as her patient, but as a charming, intelligent man who made her laugh and think deeply at the same time. You know what scared me most about the accident? Marcus confided during dinner. Not the injury itself, but the fear of losing my independence. Then I met you, and you showed me that accepting help doesn't make you weak. Word spread quickly at the hospital about their relationship. Some nurses whispered disapprovingly behind Jasmine's back, while others thought it was romantic. Sarah, the head nurse, called Jasmine into her office for a serious talk. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. Dating someone with this condition, It won't be easy. Jasmine stood her ground. Marcus is more than his disability, she replied firmly. He's the most capable person I know. Her family had mixed reactions too. Her mother worried about the challenges of an interracial relationship combined with Marcus's disability. Life is already hard enough, baby, she said during Sunday dinner. Why make it harder? But Jasmine's younger sister, Tanya, saw things differently. Have you seen the way he looks at her? She defended. That man adores our Jasmine. As weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. Marcus continued his work remotely, designing medical devices from his adapted home office. Jasmine was amazed by how he turned every challenge into an opportunity for innovation. They spent weekends exploring wheelchair-accessible parks, attending technology conferences, and enjoying simple moments together. Marcus even taught Jasmine basic engineering principles while she shared her knowledge about patient care. One evening, as they watched the sunset from Marcus's balcony, he turned to her with serious eyes. You know, some people think you're with me out of pity, he said quietly. Jasmine touched his cheek gently. Those people don't see what I see, she replied. They don't see your brilliant mind, your kind heart, or how you make me feel when we're together. Marcus caught her hand and kissed it softly. You never saw me as broken, he whispered. You saw me as whole. What Jasmine didn't know was that Marcus was struggling with a growing guilt. Every time she praised his courage in dealing with his disability, every time she helped him overcome a physical challenge, his secret became harder to bear. The truth he was hiding weighed heavily on his conscience, threatening to overshadow the beautiful relationship they were building. Yet looking at Jasmine's smiling face in the golden sunset light, Marcus knew he had never felt more torn between his research and his heart. After a year of dating, Marcus knew it was time. He had planned everything carefully, down to the smallest detail. The hospital garden where he and Jasmine first shared their dreams had been decorated with tiny white lights and her favorite flowers, purple orchids. Dr. Richards, who had been in on the plan, called Jasmine for an emergency consultation that evening. As she hurried into the garden, she stopped suddenly. The usual plain benches and simple flower beds had been transformed into something magical. Marcus? She called out, her heart beating faster. He wheeled himself out from behind a flowering arch, looking handsome in a dark blue suit. In his lap was a small velvet box. Jasmine's hands flew to her mouth as she realized what was happening. A year ago, Marcus began, his voice slightly shaky. I was in this garden, telling you about my dreams of changing the medical world. You listened to me for hours that day, not just as a nurse, but as someone who truly cared. He wheeled closer to her, the soft lights reflecting in his eyes. Since then, you've shown me what real love looks like. You never saw my wheelchair as a barrier. You saw past every limitation and straight into my heart. Jasmine felt tears forming in her eyes as Marcus continued. Behind them, she noticed movement. Her family and several hospital staff members had gathered quietly to witness the moment. There's something about you, Jasmine Thompson, Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. The way you fight for your patients, the way you light up a room with your smile, the way you believe in me, it makes me want to be a better man every single day. He reached for her hand, and she noticed his was trembling slightly. But there's something I need to tell you first, he started, looking nervous. Then he shook his head. No, that can wait. Right now, all I know is that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Opening the velvet box, he revealed a beautiful diamond ring with small purple stones surrounding it. Jasmine Thompson, will you marry me? For a moment, Jasmine couldn't speak. She looked at the man before her, the brilliant engineer who had captured her heart, the patient who had become her soulmate. Despite all the challenges they had faced and would face, she had never been more sure of anything. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. The garden erupted in cheers as Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger. Jasmine's mother was crying, and even Sarah, the head nurse who had once warned her about getting too close to patients, was wiping away tears. As Jasmine leaned down to kiss her new fiancé, she noticed something flash across his face. Was it guilt? But before she could ask, her sister Tanya rushed forward to hug her, and the moment was lost in a flood of congratulations. Later that evening, as they celebrated with their loved ones at their favorite restaurant, Marcus seemed distracted. Several times, he opened his mouth as if to say something important, then changed his mind. Is everything okay? Jasmine asked quietly, touching his hand. Marcus squeezed her hand in return. "Everything's perfect," he said, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. There's something I need to tell you before we sign the marriage license. But not tonight. Tonight is for celebrating." Jasmine felt a flutter of uncertainty in her stomach, but pushed it aside. Whatever Marcus needed to tell her, she was sure they could handle it together. After all, they had already overcome so many obstacles. As she looked around at their families laughing and celebrating together, Jasmine felt truly blessed. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's secret, whatever it was, would test their love in ways she couldn't imagine. The ring sparkled on her finger under the restaurant lights, a symbol of their love and commitment. But it was also, though she didn't know it yet, the beginning of the biggest surprise of her life. The months following their engagement were filled with both excitement and challenges. Jasmine and Marcus threw themselves into wedding planning, but finding the perfect venue proved harder than expected. Every beautiful location they visited seemed to have some accessibility issue that needed to be addressed. "Maybe we should just have it in a hospital," Marcus joked one afternoon, after their fifth venue visit ended in disappointment. But Jasmine could hear the frustration in his voice. "We'll find the perfect place," she assured him, squeezing his shoulder. "Remember what you always say about challenges being opportunities." Their persistence paid off when they discovered an elegant garden venue that was not only wheelchair-friendly, but also had an owner who was willing to make additional accommodations. The owner's son used a wheelchair too, and he understood exactly what they needed. However, as the wedding plans progressed, Marcus's behavior became increasingly strange. He spent long hours on mysterious phone calls, often ending conversations abruptly when Jasmine entered the room. His laptop, usually open and sharing space with wedding magazines on their coffee table, remained firmly closed whenever she was around. "Just finishing up some work projects before the wedding," he would say with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You know how it is with deadlines." Jasmine's mother noticed Marcus's odd behavior during a dress-fitting appointment. "Are you sure he's not getting cold feet?" she asked carefully, watching Jasmine try on her flowing white gown. "Mom, it's not like that." Jasmine defended him, but a small seed of worry had already planted itself in her mind. "He's just stressed about work." The guest list became another source of tension. Marcus was oddly specific about certain guests, especially his colleagues from Boston. They can only attend the ceremony, not the reception, he insisted, without explanation. One evening, while reviewing their wedding timeline, Marcus received a call that he took in another room. Jasmine couldn't help overhearing fragments of the conversation. "The study ends 2 days before." "Yes, I understand the risks." "No, I haven't told her yet. After the license signing, I promise." When he returned, his face was pale and troubled. Jasmine pretended to be absorbed in the seating chart, but her heart was racing. What study? What risks? What hadn't he told her? Their wedding coordinator, Lisa, noticed the tension between them during their final planning meeting. "Every couple gets nervous before the big day," she said kindly. "It's normal to have doubts." But these weren't normal doubts, and Jasmine knew it. Something bigger was brewing beneath the surface of their perfect wedding plans. Even dress shopping with her sisters couldn't fully distract her from her concerns. As she stood in front of the mirror in a beautiful white gown, her sister Tanya caught her worried expression. "What's really going on, Jas?" Tanya asked when they were alone. "You should be glowing, but you look scared." Jasmine smoothed the silk of her dress, choosing her words carefully. "I love Marcus more than anything," she said slowly, "but sometimes I feel like he's keeping something big from me, something that could change everything." That evening, during dinner at their favorite restaurant, Marcus seemed more distracted than ever. He barely touched his food, and his hands shook slightly as he held his water glass. "Marcus," Jasmine finally said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. We can face anything together." He looked at her then, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and what looked like guilt. "I will tell you everything," he promised. "But not yet. Please trust me for just a few more days." As their wedding day approached, the tension continued to build. Marcus's mysterious phone calls increased, and Jasmine noticed him practicing standing movements when he thought she wasn't watching. Yet despite her growing concerns, their love remained strong, built on a foundation of trust and understanding that would soon be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. The day before their wedding dawned bright and clear, But Marcus barely noticed the beautiful weather. He sat in his wheelchair by the window of his apartment, phone in hand, reading an email for the 10th time that morning. The message was from Dr. Richards, his research partner. Final day of the study. Remember our agreement. She deserves to know before it's official. Jasmine was busy at her apartment, sorting through last-minute wedding details with her sisters. The separation was traditional. The bride and groom shouldn't see each other the day before the wedding. But for Marcus, this distance felt like torture. He wheeled himself to his home office and opened a locked drawer. Inside was a thick folder labeled Clinical Study, Patient Experience in Mobility Care, Lead Researcher, Dr. Marcus Stevens. His hands trembled as he touched the paper. His phone buzzed again. This time it was from his research assistant in Boston. Data collection ends at midnight. Your observations have changed everything we knew about patient care. But are you sure about tomorrow? Marcus closed his eyes, remembering the first day he met Jasmine. He hadn't planned to fall in love during his research. The whole point of pretending to be disabled was to understand patient experiences firsthand, to design better medical equipment. But then she had walked into his hospital room, and everything changed. In his living room, his suit for tomorrow hung pressed and ready. Next to it was a pair of shiny black dress shoes. Shoes he hadn't worn in public for over a year. His legs were perfectly capable of walking, running, even dancing. But Jasmine had never seen him take a single step. The doorbell rang, startling him from his thoughts. It was Dr. Richards, looking concerned. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" the doctor asked, stepping inside. Marcus wheeled back and forth nervously. How do I tell her that our entire relationship started with a lie? That I'm not actually disabled? That this wheelchair was part of a research study? You could have told her months ago, Dr. Richards pointed out. Why wait until the marriage license signing? I tried so many times, Marcus replied, his voice breaking. But every time I saw how much she cared, how she fought for me, how she defended our love to everyone, I couldn't bear to see the trust in her eyes turn to betrayal. Meanwhile, across town, Jasmine was having her own moments of worry. As she packed her overnight bag for the hotel, she found a crumpled piece of paper that had fallen from Marcus's jacket the last time he visited. It was a medical document with words like study conclusion and final observations visible through the creases. Her sister Tanya caught her staring at it. "What's that?" Jasmine quickly tucked it away. "Nothing. Just a paper from Marcus's work." But her hands were shaking slightly as she continued packing. That evening, Marcus called her. His voice sounded strange, strained. "Jasmine," he said softly, "before we sign the marriage license tomorrow, there's something important I need to tell you." Her heart skipped a beat. "You can tell me now," she suggested. "No," he replied quickly. "This needs to be face to face. Just remember that everything we shared was real. Every moment, every feeling, every word of love was real." After they hung up, Jasmine sat on her bed, clutching her phone. What could be so important that it couldn't wait until after the wedding? Why did Marcus sound so afraid? In his own apartment, Marcus sat in his wheelchair one last time as a patient. Tomorrow, the truth would come out. Tomorrow, he would stand up and face the consequences of his deception. Tomorrow, he might lose the best thing that ever happened to him. He wheeled himself to his bedroom window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Jasmine was preparing to become his wife, not knowing that in less than 24 hours, everything she thought she knew about him would change forever. The courthouse was quiet that morning as Jasmine and Marcus arrived for their marriage license signing. Jasmine looked beautiful in a simple white dress, while Marcus wore a dark suit, sitting nervously in his wheelchair. Their families waited in the hallway, giving them privacy for what should have been a simple legal formality. "Before we go in," Marcus said, his voice trembling, "we need to talk privately." He gestured toward an empty conference room nearby. Jasmine's heart pounded as she followed him. The past few weeks of mysterious phone calls and strange behavior had led to this moment. She closed the door behind them, the click echoing in the silent room. Marcus positioned his wheelchair facing her but kept his distance. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Jasmine," he began, then stopped, struggling to find words. "What I'm about to tell you, it might change everything between us." She stood there, her wedding folder clutched to her chest like a shield. "Whatever it is, we can work through it together," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Marcus took a deep breath. The accident that brought me to your hospital. There was no accident. Jasmine felt the room spin slightly. What do you mean? I'm not disabled, he said quietly. Then, before her shocked eyes, he slowly stood up from the wheelchair. His legs were steady, his movements smooth and practiced. Jasmine stumbled backward, her wedding folder dropping to the floor, papers scattering everywhere. I don't understand, she whispered. I'm a researcher, Marcus continued, staying standing but not moving toward her. For the past year, I've been conducting a study on patient experiences in rehabilitative care. Living as a wheelchair user was part of my research. The room fell silent except for the sound of Jasmine's quick breathing. Memories flashed through her mind. All the times she'd helped him with therapy, defended him against doubters, fought for accessible spaces for their wedding. Everything was a lie. Her voice cracked. No. Marcus stepped forward, then stopped when she flinched. The research was real. I'm really a biomedical engineer, but falling in love with you wasn't part of the plan. Every feeling, every moment we shared was real. Tears started rolling down Jasmine's cheeks. All those times I helped you with physical therapy, when I thought you were making progress. Your care showed me what true compassion looks like, Marcus said desperately. You changed how I understand patient care. The whole study changed because of you. Why tell me now? Jasmine asked, her voice barely audible. Why not months ago? The study ended at midnight last night. I couldn't legally reveal my role until it was complete. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. I tried to find ways to tell you sooner, but I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. Outside the conference room, their families waited, unaware of the drama unfolding inside. Through the door's window, Jasmine could see her mother checking her watch, her sister arranging her bouquet. All those phone calls, the mysterious meetings. Research team updates, Marcus confirmed. Dr. Richards was my research partner. The whole medical staff knew. They had to, for the study to work. Jasmine felt her legs weaken and sat heavily in a nearby chair. The man she loved, the man she was about to marry, stood before her whole and healthy. It should have been a miracle, a joy. Instead, it felt like her world was shattering. The marriage license, she said suddenly, understanding dawning. You couldn't sign it under false pretenses. Marcus nodded. I had to tell you the truth before we made it legal. He slowly knelt before her, no longer pretending any disability. Jasmine, I know I've broken your trust, but everything else, my love for you, our connection, our dreams together, it's all real. Their families were starting to look concerned through the window. In a few minutes, someone would surely come to check on them. Jasmine looked at the man kneeling before her, the same man she'd fallen in love with, yet suddenly a stranger. The biggest decision of her life now lay before her. Could she forgive this deception, or was the trust between them broken forever? Engagement ring catching the morning light. Marcus stayed kneeling, barely breathing, waiting for her decision. Finally, Jasmine spoke, her voice quiet but clear. You lied to me for a year. Yes, Marcus admitted. You let me care for you, worry about you, fight for you? Yes. And the whole time, you could walk. Marcus swallowed hard. Yes. Jasmine stood up suddenly, pacing the small room. Do you know what people said when we started dating? They called me an angel, said I was so good for taking care of a disabled man. But I always told them they were wrong, that you were the strong one, that you inspired me. You did inspire me, Marcus interrupted. Your compassion, your dedication to your patients. It changed everything about my research. Because of you, we're completely redesigning our medical equipment to focus on the human connection, not just the technical solutions. Jasmine stopped pacing and looked at him. The research paper you were writing in the hospital that first night. It was about the gap between how medical professionals think patients feel and how patients actually feel. Marcus stood up slowly. But you, Jasmine, you already knew how to bridge that gap. You saw me as a person first, not just a condition to be treated. Through the conference room window, they could see their families growing more worried. Jasmine's mother was now talking to a courthouse official, gesturing anxiously. I need to know one thing, Jasmine said, turning back to Marcus. When you proposed to me in that garden, when you said you loved me, was that real? The most real thing in my life, Marcus answered without hesitation. I started this study thinking I would just observe and document. I never expected to fall in love. You weren't part of the research, Jasmine. You were the unexpected miracle that changed everything. Jasmine walked to the window, watching their concerned families. Her sister Tanya was now crying, probably thinking the wedding was off. Her mother looked ready to break down the door. You know what the strangest part is? Jasmine said, still facing the window. I fell in love with your mind first. Your determination, your intelligence, your kindness. The wheelchair, it was never what defined you to me. She turned around slowly. And that hasn't changed. Marcus hardly dared to breathe. What are you saying? I'm saying that I fell in love with who you are, not what you can or cannot do. Jasmine walked back to him. Yes, you lied about being disabled. But you didn't lie about being the man who makes me laugh, who challenges me to think differently, who wants to make the world better for others. Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now. Does this mean? It means we have a lot to work through, Jasmine said firmly. You'll need to earn back my trust. But, she took his hand, I still want to marry you. The relief on Marcus's face was immediate and overwhelming. He pulled her into a tight embrace, both of them crying now. No more secrets, Jasmine whispered against his chest. Promise me. I promise. Everything from now on will be completely honest. They pulled apart as a knock sounded at the door. The courthouse official was getting impatient. Ready to sign those papers? Marcus asked, smiling through his tears. One condition, Jasmine said, wiping her eyes. You walk down the aisle at the wedding tomorrow. I want everyone to see the real you. Marcus laughed. Deal. When they opened the conference room door, their families rushed forward, full of questions about their tears and emotional state. But Jasmine just smiled and held up the marriage license. Let's make this official, she said. The next day, their wedding guests gasped in shock when Marcus stood from his wheelchair to walk down the aisle. But no one was more surprised than Dr. Richards, who had bet against this happy ending. As Marcus and Jasmine shared their first dance as husband and wife, she whispered in his ear, Your research conclusion should note that love is the best rehabilitation of all. Marcus just held her closer, knowing that his greatest discovery hadn't been about medical equipment or patient care at all. It had been finding a love strong enough to overcome any obstacle, even the ones he had created himself.